a Hindu renaissance. And when I say Hindu renaissance, then it is also necessary to get your feedback about the sleeping Hindu.
One segment of the population to go up and impose its views, and then there are also still issues with education. There's also a lot of foreign influence via NGOs and other groups interfering with India. As India rises, the jealousy.
You start by addressing what is called the crisis in the psyche of India.
Karma yoga is not important, and actually karma yoga is the basis of all the yogas. Even asana should be done in a spirit of karma yoga.
You think that there was a disconnect between the politics of this country and basic sense of population of this country, which related with the Hindu civilization?
Marxist and control of the textbooks. So yes, it was a disjoint. It's sad, but the people who took power in India, the Nehruvian generation, actually were more of the British and had a special sympathy towards the Muslims, but not for the Hindus.
My honor to be here, and thank you very much. Let me have the pleasure of shaking you by the hand, as a Brit would say.
Namaste. Welcome once again to another edition of the Jaipur Dialogues podcast. And I have with me a great teacher and a great person, a great Hindu, Swami Vamadev Ji Shastri, also known as Dr. David Frawley. Welcome, Dr. Frawley, to the Jaipur Dialogues studio.
It's always great to be with you at the Jaipur Dialogues in the Jaipur studio, because you are able to go into all these subjects at a very deep level and get into the essence of it and draw out the deeper meanings. So I feel very honored to have these discussions with you.
Thank you, sir. I want to understand from you, you've been coming to India now almost, 40, 45 years. I think you started coming here in late 70s. So do you see any signs of a Hindu renaissance? And when I say Hindu renaissance, then it is also necessary to get your feedback about the sleeping Hindu.
Yes.
Over this period.
Yes. Well, first of all, there have obviously been many changes. Even over the years, I was also here when Babi Masjid was taken down. I was also fairly active during the Vajpayee era and working with the Nehru, etc. And simply changes that are made. You have what's happened relative to Kashmir. The Round Temple has come up. The economy, the infrastructure has improved. The stature of India, Bharat on the global stage has come up. So yes, there's been a lot of these changes. And if we look back then, if I were to have thought, after all the trouble happened, but for us, the big problem is when Vajpayee's government was taken down, we got quite depressed almost as a group. That this has happened now, and the fact that you've been able to maintain a more positive Hindu view of government and leadership for about 10, 15 years, that is a great accomplishment. However, the world also continues to get more difficult and complex, and there are still very important problems to address on demographic issues. It's a kind of the two-edged sword in a way, because on one hand you need to reduce the population, but on the other hand you cannot have one segment of the population to go up and impose its views. And then there are also still issues with education. There's also a lot of foreign influence via NGOs and other groups interfering with India. As India rises, the jealousy that's coming up in various countries, including European, even North American countries. So the challenges are also coming at a certain level. And we're in a crisis in humanity now. Part of that is because the technology is moving faster than the ability of people to adapt it or use it in a positive way. And we're not certain what is going to happen, because every technology, new technology we develop is eventually weaponized. Look at airplanes at the turn of the 20th century. They seemed to be this great wonder, but then they became a great wonder in the warfare and other things. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, because you have always historic people. But at the same time, there are challenges today that humanity doesn't seem to have a deeper spiritual awareness. And the only country that's really preserved that is India. But even in India, it has its challenges and needs to be maintained. And the Vedic knowledge is getting some honoring, but it needs more.
What did you have in mind when you wrote your book, Arise Arjuna? Because I think it refers probably to the last shloka of the Bhagavad Gita.
Well, it's an interesting thing. You see, I was studying with a teacher in Russia. His name was Dr. B.L. Bashta. He was my main Ayurvedic teacher, but he was also an author. He had done biographies of Golwalkar, Guru Gobind Singh, and he had a great understanding. But he was also he understood Tilak and all of that. And he asked me to write some articles for publication in Larashu, Kudi, and Larati. And one of the ones that came up was this article, short article I didn't call Arise Arjuna. And some of its inspiration came from studying the works of Swami Rangatirtha. It's not as well known as Vivekananda, but he has very deep and inspirational insights. So Vashta had that article and got it published at the 25th anniversary issue of the publication of the Vishwa Hindu Parish. So it came at that point, but it came at a point in my own work when I realized that following that, this particularly Swami Mahantutta, that there had to be some awakening and inspiration. It wasn't just enough putting out information or trying to make everybody very safe. So that idea that there needed to be that deeper dimension of Hinduism and also Sanatana Dharma and Bharat, not just the Ruvian idea of an independent India or that sort of thing. So Arise Arjuna came out of that, and also a certain understanding that that's what Krishna was trying to do. He wasn't just simply trying to get Arjuna to defeat the Kauravas. He wanted to maintain this Dharmic image and power of Bharat and this Kshatriya Dharma force. And that's how it remains a archetypal image, you might say, for what needs to be done today. And after India's independence, there wasn't that reclamation of the true independence at an inner level and even at a social, political level. It was a really apologetic independence. And so that needed to be done to really awaken not only India, but to bring these Hindu teachings out. And in any sadhana, you need that Arjuna spirit. You have to have that kind of warrior energy. You can't just be some sidelight that you do or something that you do to please others. You have to be able to face the obstacles involved. And I also had a sense that more obstacles were coming, so it's important that the Arjuna consciousness is there along with Krishna. In fact, Krishna creates that.
So I'm reading from your book, Arise Arjuna. I was trying to locate it. It's actually here. In my e-library. So in this, you start by addressing what is called the crisis in the psyche of India.
Yes.
Do you think there is a repair now?
No, I would say it hasn't been examined. Let's say crisis is there. And part of it is also why we call me apologetic Hindu. And that's
Would you call it mental slavery?
well, it's apologetic Hindu. Hindus really, and I don't know if it still happens to the same degree when I made that statement. I used to be asking Hindus what religion do you follow? And the typical answer was, I'm a Hindu, but I accept all the other religions too. Apologetic, defensive, and unwillingness to fight. They were thinking that even voting, if it's offensive to other people, I won't vote. So there was definitely that sense that Hindus are in that crisis of Arjuna, who doesn't want to fight because he's fighting against his relatives, rather than looking at the broader sense of how you deal with Dharma. And in that respect, India as a country was not taking its proper role as visual guru or even a great country, because instead of dealing with the difficulties directly, it was take this apologetic, defensive approach and kind of, well, we'll let you do what you want to do, but we have our own views, but we're not going to challenge you directly. So that Arjuna spirit is the basis of the Kshatriya Dharma idea, which of course also comes up.
And that's why I think in the last shloka it says, Yatra yogeshwara krishna, yatra partho dharavdayas, tatra shrivaji bhutar, dravad bhitar, matir maha. So for an Arjuna to arise, you do need a yogeshwara Krishna.
Yes, you do need a Yogeshwara Krishna, but Krishna was also having the Kshatriya approach in the Kshatriya. In fact, he says in the Gita, he taught the yoga to the Kshatriyas. And yoga is actually Kshatriya Dharma. Of course, all the martial arts came out of yoga. That's another thing. But of course, you need the guidance. You need a dharmic guidance, but you also have to take action. And the idea that all action is bad is not true. And also the idea that action, karma yoga is not important. And actually, karma yoga is the basis of all the yogas. Even asana should be done in the spirit of karma yoga. And what karma yoga means is that it's also misinterpreted. It doesn't mean you act without considering the consequences. It means that you enact everything you do as an offering to the highest, a pursuit of excellence, an offering to Sri Krishna. But you want to do the best. You want the best results, but from a dharmic standpoint, not just simply for personal or family gain.
You think that there was a disconnect between the politics of this country and the basic sense of the civilization, or the basic sense of population of this country, which related with the Hindu civilization?
Well, of course, in fact, it's also, you can see the mentality and the aspiration behind the independence movement, where you had figures like Tilak, Tagore, Aurobindo, etc., was not followed. In fact, it was denied and contradicted by the generation or the people that took power in India, the Nehruvian people, and particularly their mentors. They chose the Marxists as their gurus, not the great gurus of Bharat. They didn't restore a single temple. They didn't make a single monument to a great guru of Bharat, but they put their own pictures everywhere. And they also gave this almost adulation towards the Marxist and control of the textbooks. So yes, it was a disjoint. It's sad, but the people who took power in India, the Nehruvian generation, actually were more of the British and had a special sympathy towards the Muslims, but not for the Hindus.
In fact, Nehru is on record saying that he feared the Hindu revivalism more than Muslim communism.
Yes, and the reason for that is Hindu revivalism would remove him from power, but Muslim protectionism would keep him in power. But one point I want to say, his wife remained a fairly staunch Hindu. He never particularly liked that, but that is the fact.
Nehru's wife?
Yes.
But she died in 1935.
I know, she didn't, she was a staunch Hindu.
So,
I didn't mean that she remained,
and she did have an influence on Nehru. In fact, Nehru was more influenced by other Veeris, yes, who were close to him.
yes,
More by Abrilaman Bet is books more by Lasliana Saidu or Sucheta Krikulani or Mirani Sarabhai.
He was quite a womanizer, as we know. And even Gandhi, he was still under the shadow of the British influence. In fact, Aurobindo said Gandhi and Ahimsa came from Tolstoy, not from the Gita.
Gandhi's direct translation of the Gita, have you read? Have you read Gandhi's translation of the Gita?
No, I haven't.
Nanasakti, or it is called.
But I am familiar with Gandhi's views, and I'm also familiar with how he lived and what he recommended. He did recommend a lot of Hindus to join the British Army, in spite of the fact that weapons were there.
I would particularly like you to comment on his experiments in celibacy. Have you seen any example of this kind? Any rishi or any guru having tested his brahmacharya in this way?
Well, first of all, you're not simply testing it, you are attempting it. When you do that, no, if you were to test it, you would go off in the wilderness. I mean, if you were to just practice it, you would test it that way. In fact, he also called about testing truth. You don't test truth, you discover what truth is. So Gandhi was a very complex person, and I don't want to speak as an expert on Gandhi, but I don't think he understood the Hindu tradition, and I don't think he understood the Gita or Sri Ram. I'm not saying he was a bad person because of that, but somehow he remained in that Western education, and he also turned ahimsa into kind of the dogma. In other words, you always practice ahimsa, although we didn't recommend that for if you join the British Army. But that was the issue there. And with his own daughter, or his own grandmother, the nieces, that's not something you do because you're a well-known person. And these are young women. So they have to fall under your chapeau. So that shouldn't have been done, or it should have been made into a public image. And I think that I think later on judge Gandhi, and be some people say, I'm saying upgrading Gandhi. But I think there are certain mistakes there that we need to recommend. And there are other gurus like Sri Aurobindo who said that Gandhi was not really following the Hindu tradition. He was influenced by some others on the outside. And that, in fact, Aurobindo was saying that if India followed Gandhi, it would be very difficult for the country.
You have a fair grounding in Buddhism, and you also know the Oriental Christianity, the Eastern Christian, Orthodox Christian. A lot of people say that these ideas basically come from Orthodox Christianity, a mix of extreme non-violence practiced by some of the Buddhist sects.
Well, relative to the Buddhists, the samurai were also Buddhists, and the Buddhists had their martial arts. And China, in which it went under Buddhism, never practiced ahimsa. When Mongols came in, they tried to defend themselves. So I don't think that's entirely true. Now, Buddha himself was the Kshatriya, and what he did is he organized his monastic orders almost like an army. But there was, of course, the concept of ahimsa. But even the Jains, I don't believe that I think the Jain kings also had their army. And I don't have had the great study. I'm not certain of what all the Jain kings did. But there's generally that dharmic recognition that the Kshatriya Dharma has its particular place, and that the king follows the Kshatriya Dharma, but the king has a yoga guru or a purohit who transcends that or represents simply the Brahma Dharma. Even Vedas say the Brahma or the spiritual knowledge and the Kshatriya or the ruling power meet together.
For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a shloka, 18th chapter, 17th shloka, say that Yasya krito bhavo buddhir yasya nalikyate atvatsa ivan lokan na anti na nibhajyate. Let's say that actually hinsa is of the mind.
Yes.
So if you are killing someone without any ego involved in it, then it is not hinsa, and the karma doesn't lie.
Yes. But you have to understand, they misinterpret ahimsa. Himsa is harm. Ahimsa also means reducing and eliminating that which is harmful. And in that respect, that we say, ahimsa is born of rajoguna, right? Or even tamas. But the basic law of the gunas is that people at a level of rajas only change when they're made to feel pain. If you come to a rajasic person and use ahimsa, or even surrender, or not fight back, they interpret that as their victory.
Your cowardice.
Yeah, and now you're cowardice, but you're surrender. And a lot of the foreign armies, particularly the Muslims, saw it that way. When the Hindus practiced ahimsa, they said, okay, you're surrendering to us. And what did the British do? They divided the Hindus into martial races and non-martial races. And the martial races they tried to bring into the British army. And notably the Sikhs, even though the Sikhs were the last group they had to defeat. This is a sideline. I do want to mention it since it is coming up. This idea that the British took over India in the 18th century is totally wrong. Even the Marathas weren't defeated until 1890, and the Sikhs were not defeated until 1849. So 1857 wasn't a war of independence, it was a continuation of the same rejection of the British rule. And you had the Kshatriya Dharma, and you got him. You've had a Ahilyabai and so many others, and you had this old Lenny Karnika and all of that. They fought. They were not just they accepted. So and who is the father of Bharat, India? It wasn't Mahatma Gandhi. It was Shivaji. And you can see that as a fact. So they moved away from that kind of traditional connection, but in the process they lost the Shakti and they lost even the justification. Now, the other point I want to raise about Gandhi, again, I'm not criticizing Gandhi as a person, but you don't put Gandhi on your money. And the reason is very simple. He himself would not want that. And he represented poverty, and it doesn't resonate. I mean, all traditionally, India was a country that honored Lakshmi. Lakshmi and Vishnu went together. So Lakshmi has to be given her place. So what happened was they tended to idolize Gandhi, and then Nehru tried to become the king. And we say the adulation of the dynasty. And they're still trying to impose that dynasty. How many generations down is it they had a divine right to rule?
In this criteria, where do you see the Ayodhya movement? Does it have the largest awakening? Was it the largest awakening phenomenon?
Well, what we have to understand is that throughout the resistance, whether it was the Hindu resistance to the Muslims or even to the British, they rebuilt the temples. In fact, the Marathas rebuilt Ujjain. And Ahilyabai was the one who started rebuilding Kashi Vishwanath. So the temples were being rebuilt by the Hindus. Now, when the British came in, they kind of stopped that because they didn't want the Hindus to have too much power. And their judgment on Ayodhya, yes, is a bad thing the Muslims did. It was too long ago, so there's no need to do anything about it. That's not at all true. It's an ancient monument. It has to be given its historical precedence. So now the Ram temple then would be the one that would be the most obvious that you wanted to restore. And of course it had the history. It was still being honored. Anyway, it was still going there. So the independence of India as a civilization required restoration of at least some temples, and Nehru to restore any. And even when the Somnath was restored, he opposed that. So that was his way of preventing the idea of India to go back to the Hindu civilization. He wanted his British socialist modern nation state of India and all of that. So the temples have to be there. And also we have what is called the Vastu Shastra. the temples also, and there's such a vastu. So we need to restore the vastu of the country as well, and all the other countries of the world. The Bulgarians, they got rid of the mosque that were there. In fact, in visiting Bulgaria, what the Muslims did there is the churches had to be below ground. They could not be higher than any mosque, so they weren't allowed to build a church above ground. So it's a way. And then the Saudis, they have eliminated, I think, every Turkish mosque in the country, which are quite a few, because the Turks had ruled there for some centuries, as a monument of foreign rule. So that confusion happened in India, also to prevent the awakening of India at the civilization level. The gurus did that. They tried that at the independence. But of course, Nehru and company were against Indian civilization.
There's an argument, I think, the foremost purveyor of that argument is Shashi Tharoor. Is you? Shashi Tharoor? Yes, Shashi Tharoor. Who conducted a debate with you.
Yes.
That was the time that he was talking about Hindu Pakistan.
Yes.
And he came up with this theory that do we want to become a Hindu Pakistan?
Yes. Yes. Well, you know, he had a number of problems there because he was representing a government which was trying to turn India into a kingship.
Or queenship.
Yeah, kingship or queenship or family dynasty. And he became their total Hindu, just like Karan Singh was at a certain point. They've studied Hinduism, they'd say nice things about it. In fact, Shashi Tharoor could criticize the British for what they did to the Hindus, but he wouldn't criticize the Muslims.
He said they became us.
Yeah, they became us, but they didn't. If they became us, they're not worshiping temples, their loyalty is elsewhere. And the idea of a Hindu Pakistan, the only Pakistan that's a real Pakistan is Pakistan. There's no place for Hindus there, by the way. Hindus have been very much oppressed in Pakistan. And the Hindu Pakistans are these little mini Muslim communities created in India. They're not the Hindus do. But what happened in the case of Nehru is that they divided the Hindu vote, and also they divided it also between the secular, British educated people. And then they unified the Muslim vote to vote entirely for that. And I think that was also what the British had done too. The British also wanted to keep the Hindus down because they were a larger group. So there has been this movement to increase the Pakistani influence inside India, like the Waqf Board. Many Pakistans are allowed. And also, even though there were wars with Pakistan, there was never really a fundamental challenge of the ideology behind it within Indians.
One of the major impediments to the rise of Hindu consciousness has been the fallacy that I think has been almost universal till about 10 years back, or even till 5 years back, that all religions are the same. You think that argument now going out of the window as the Hindu consciousness increases?
Yes. Well, I know you've written a great book about it, so I think that would help quite a bit. But it's something I've always supported. In fact, you have to remember there's no other religion in the world that says that. Christianity doesn't say all religions are the same. Islam doesn't say all religions are the same. They don't have interconvertible holy places. You can't do your church in a mosque. You can't do your namaz in a church. And when they conquered other countries, they removed their sacred sites and put their sacred sites on instead. Not only the Hindus, but even the poor Native Americans lost all their sacred sites for that reason. So there's no history of the religions even wanting to be the same, and plus their doctrines are mutually contradictory. Islam doesn't teach you go to a Christian heaven and sit at the right hand of Jesus and Mary, and Christianity does not accept Islam or Muhammad as a son of God. And of course, they never accept anything Hindus. Hindus are idolaters, and they should be converted. If all religions were the same, why was there conversion? And why is there the attempt to conquer other countries at the level of the religion. In fact, this whole idea that there is only one God has, I would say, two meanings. Now, the meaning the Hindus state is that there's unity, there's the same unitary divine in everything. But that's not what the monotheists mean. They mean ours is the only God. It's a statement of exclusivity. And when you have an exclusive God, you have to conquer or convert the world. Because that one God doesn't exist as an existential spiritual reality, but needs to be brought out as a physical reality.
In other words, it's not a one-word syndrome. It is an only word syndrome.
Yes, our only God syndrome. And yet even monotheists, as we're all fighting with each other, both with other monotheists, like the Christians and the Muslims, and even with each other, even within their own religions, like Shias and Sunnis, or Protestants and Catholics. So there is a unity of consciousness behind the universe, that there can't just be a one God in that particular sense. And religions being the same is totally contrary to logic. You can't say all people are the same, all art is the same, all music is the same, and all these other things. You have to recognize life is full of diversity. And why shouldn't religions be different? Why shouldn't they have different practices? Why do they all have to agree with one another? Spirituality is the science of consciousness. That's what we need to promote. People can have their different religious beliefs, and please let the native people, they have very powerful connections to all of nature. And yet we think they're lower because they don't have a one God. But actually they see the same.
Right. So in recent years, do you see the consciousness increasing because of the internet? Is internet a prime mover in bringing out the truths of the monotheistic religions and giving Hindus their self-esteem back?
Well, first of all, we have a better potential for communication with all the information technology, but we also have the potential better to control it. For example, if you go on, take Wikipedia, for example, that's becoming an enforcing of a certain leftist view upon everyone. And in terms of religions, you have to have a deeper understanding of who you are. If you're inner being, it's not just a matter of information. You can find good things about all religions or people at some levels, but the truth has to be something eternal and infinite and inner consciousness, not just simply a belief. And it's not data or information. It is inner perception.
In this particular book that I'm referring to, I'll also talk about in universal Hinduism. You also mentioned Ram Swarupji, and particularly his work on Hindu views of Christianity and Islam.
Ram Swarup, yes. Yes, I knew Ram Swarup fairly well, and I did write the forewords, which were fairly long, about 15 pages for each of his four collected works. And he made a lot of things very clear that way, that we need to understand what the religion actually teaches and means. Now we have this term God, but again, God, what does that mean? Because to the monotheists, God has a certain meaning. A lot of Hinduism use the term God as the same as Paramatma. Even I've heard some missionaries use the term Paramatma for God for Hindu audience. He also talked about names of God, as what are the names, what is the meaning behind those. And he questioned then the meaning of monotheism. And he also said that in mysticism, you're also connecting to some realities, astral planes, some beings. So you can also be drawing in certain negative forces, and you can often magnify that. Even Vivekananda said the same thing, that it's not just a question of having a strong belief. It has to be done at a sattvic level, according to a recognition of a universal consciousness, not just the superiority of our particular belief over everybody else's.
Now, you also written this book, Universal Hinduism. And I believe this is also a rewriting of an old book.
Well, it's more than that. I would say about almost half of it is something new. Although the principles underlying universal Hinduism have all been addressed as well. And the idea, first of all, is that the Hindu teaching is about universal consciousness. It's not about something limited to one place or another. Yet, at the same time, universality, it's also recognizing the individual. There's a certain statement in ecology which says, think universally but act locally. That's also kind of the Hindu view. It has to be adapted. And that also the concept of Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means something eternal, infinite, and also adapted or adjusted relative to expression, relative to time, place, person, and culture, and also embracing not just a religious belief, but all aspects of knowledge, art, culture, and the universe as a whole. So Sanatana Dharma is how we also have to understand Hinduism at a universal level. Sometimes people say, oh, we have to get rid of the word Hindu because it suggests a geographically location.
Right.
And one could say that, well, maybe in the long run, but the fact is, if you don't use the term Hindu, you're not going to find a book like the Gita on the shelves in different countries. It has that name, and so you accept the change of name. There's adaptations of name. France used to be called Gaul. They'll return it to Gaul and no longer call it France to be more politically correct. And even India, the correct name is Bharat. Of course, that is easier to change. But we need to bring out that deeper meaning because Hinduism is also yoga, Vedanta, all the different things, sciences, and understanding nature, all the art and music. This is something very important to understand. A monotheistic religion that we know are and do not have much art or music. The more monotheistic they are, they seem to be rather restricted in that regard. Even in the division we have between the sacred and the profane, which they have. In the Hindu tradition, you see the sacred everywhere. Dancing can be part of it, music can be part of it, Lakshmi can be part of it, Kali can be part of it. They also leave the deity out. They don't have a goddess. For example, in Christianity, Mary is the mother of God. She's not the mother of the universe. That's the statement of Catholic theology, and that's not my point of view. Islam also doesn't have that. So that effulgence of not just spirituality and religion in the outer sense, but the music, the art, look at all the Vedangas and all aspects of Vedic knowledge. It embraces the whole of life and all aspects of art and science.
And as the Hindu identity asserts itself more and more, we find those usual naysayers coming back, and then they blame the jati and varnas. They say that you want to bring back the Manusmriti art and all that. How do you tackle that?
Oh, very easily. First of all, if you want to see a really caste-based science society, look at London at the turn of the 20th century, under the Victorian era. And look at the royalty of Europe, which continued into the 20th century. Now, also there's a distinction. Let's go back also to understand this teaching. They say that caste comes from the Purusha Sukta, right?
Yes.
Well, what does the Purusha Sukta say, first of all? Purusha Vedam Sarva. The Purusha is everything. The entire universe is one being, one consciousness, one Atma. That's what the teaching action is. And then it says that society should be modeled like the human body. Because it's an organic thing, you have different functions, so different organs have different functions. So that is the basis. Now the problem is if that gets reduced to just simply family and birth, although family and birth is important, you have more musicians in a musical family than one that is not. So the application of it can be wrong, but we need an organic basis to society, and we need recognition that the universe is one being, and also that society, humanity should be one being, and all living beings. We have to recognize it's not just human beings have a right to live. All living beings should be honored.
So quite right. In fact, I have this particular Rigveda. I have this noted somewhere. Rigveda 9.112.3. This is Mandal 9. Yes. And 112. And the third richa of that says the meaning of that is that I am the singer. The father is the physician. Mother throws the corn upon the riding stones. Yes. Having various occupations. Yeah. And desiring nature, we remain in the world like cattle in the stall. And then say flow into the Indra. That's the Masa.
And you know, it's very interesting. Indra becomes an outcast in the Vedas. Why? Because in order to transcend the outer world, he has to do things that were forbidden. So Indra, the most highest of the Vedic gods, goes beyond the ordinary rules of right and wrong, good and evil, not to do satyatarik, but to move from just an outer appearance to an inner knowledge.
And therefore he becomes an outcast. So he's a pure kind of things that nobody takes note of. That's in the same family there are 3 different occupations and impacts.
Yes. And even the Swami who leaves society becomes a kind of outcast. He's outside the caste system.
Yes. He conducts his own funeral before going into the monastic order.
Yes. So in that regard, you're not prevented from going beyond. And the Atma is present in all beings, in Chandra asses, and come to with the Chandala. And the European, all these cultures had their different social levels. This idea of, even in the Vedas, you don't even have an outcast. You have the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, and they have a Chalvatar Vish, which means the rest of the people. And in Europe and all these other countries, they also had the kings were on the aristocrats could not marry the common person. And of course, the priests were outside the low levels. So it's not that there's something unique to the Hindus, and Hinduism is bad because it has it. The other thing to understand is they say, well, the Hindus have, this bad law that discriminates against society. The worst form of apartheid and discrimination is the whole idea of believers versus non-believers. The non-believers, they don't just simply lose their caste, they have to go suffer eternal torture for not following a certain belief. And you cannot be close or associate with a non-believer, because then you could also then become a heretic, and then you also end up in those very bad places after you go. So we need to recognize the Atman within is one, but of course the bodies and minds are different, ages are different. And as a society, you have to have certain organic functions. You need lawyers, you need doctors, you need various professions, but we have to be careful not to just stereotype it by birth.
Yeah. You also talked about in this book information technology and inner knowledge reservation, and also talked about artificial intelligence and consciousness.
Yes, that's very important, and I address in a number of contexts. First of all, artificial intelligence or AI is first of all a misnomer. An artificial person is not a real person. artificial food doesn't give you nutrition. So intelligence cannot be artificial. It requires intelligence and discernment. What is called AI is just the more sophisticated version of information technology, and it works at a mathematical and a communications basis. But as the Vedas say, we have the two forms of knowledge: the outer knowledge based on name, form, and number, and the inner knowledge or the self-knowledge. So the AI is outer knowledge. It's totally quantifiable. It's a mathematical thing and something that is programmed. It cannot have an original consciousness or original thought. It doesn't have prana. So it has its place in managing and organizing data. But it cannot be your guru, and it cannot give us wisdom, and it cannot make decisions for us on how we should live. That is the first point. The second point is that when we just immerse ourselves in the information technology, then what's happening? Power of attention goes down, memory gets reduced in the children, sensory acuity is going down. Why? Because you're looking at a two-dimensional screen. You're not looking at depth. Mind gets shallow. So I'm not saying the technology doesn't have its use in the quantitative realm, but in the qualitative realm, we still need the vision and the consciousness. If you have inner detachment, then you're not going to be, technology cannot control it. If you don't, then like with the case of the children, the media through the technology is programming their minds and giving them certain values. And the other problem arises is that we make our virtual reality more important than our actual physical and mental reality. So what's happening today is we need to have an education that compensates for the negative aspects of the technology. You have to, higher knowledge comes out in space, it comes out in silence, it comes out in solitude. Real art still needs to be done with the hands. It can't just be done by a computer program, or helpful that may be at certain levels. So we have to grow back and understand that view of the higher knowledge versus the lower knowledge. We still need the Atma Vidya in order to deal with the quantitative aspects. And we must remember that any technology that we as human beings have, we tend to weaponize. Whether it was gunpowder, whether it was swords, whether it is airplanes. Nuclear technology was so dangerous that we kind of shut it down. Now that we've gotten used to it, unfortunately, we're kind of playing around with that danger again. So we have to recognize and have a deeper vision to deal with and have these stronger forms of energy and power.
So we do recognize that there is a Hindu renaissance going on. Yes. What are the challenges? Can it actually acquire the potential that it can possibly?
Well, the Hindu Renaissance has actually been going on throughout the whole independence movement. Now look at the great figures of India in the late 19th and 20th century, whether it was Vivekananda and Ramakrishna and Aurobindo and Ramana Maharshi and Anandamayi, Tagore, and so many. What other culture produced that? In any century, you don't have. In fact, this idea of all the great yogis and rishis, you don't. You have saints, where you have leaders of various sorts. So that Renaissance was actually there, and out of that yoga movement and Vedic sciences came to start spreading all over the world. And the problem was the Hindu Renaissance did not occur at the Kshatriya level within the government, where at the educational level it wasn't brought in. You have all these textbooks that talk about the Mughals, but how many pages are given to the great gurus of India's independence movement? Not much. And if they are brought in, they're brought in again as these kind of figures who just make everything the same and all good, and that's the Viveka needs to be taught. basis of all Vedic and higher knowledge is the Veda. And that has been left out. Instead, we have sameness, or we have dhala and information. So the Hindu Renaissance is now moving into the society, the government, and even globally, we have seen that. There's also some revival of art. For example, you still have classical art, dance, and music in India, but you don't have it in Europe. They're doing the things that were done a century or more ago, or they're doing a new form of them in a old form, in which the tradition was thrown out, and they have them confirming.
Oh, yes. If you don't during the Paris Olympics.
Yes. So, and the Hindu Renaissance is also Renaissance of the Sanatana Dharma and the Vedic sciences, and this whole understanding of nature, ecology, consciousness. Consciousness is everywhere. Prana is everywhere. It's not just, but we human beings we are mind. Mind is embodied consciousness.
Actually, I was talking about Hindu Renaissance also at a more mundane level.
Yes.
And we see that a Hindu identity, let's put it as a consciousness of a Hindu identity.
Yes.
You yourself mentioned that we used to degree a political.
Yes.
We knew that seems to have grown over the years within India.
Yes.
Also outside India.
Yes.
But outside India, we also see a counter movement.
Yes.
Against it. But
yes,
that has deterred people. Yes. And I think some very strong movers and very strong ideas have come through to counter them. Yes. Now, in that context, I want to know what you feel the challenges are to the realization of these petitions.
This is what we have to understand. As India rises, and Hinduism, all the missionaries and armies have failed. It causes a lot of jealousy to see India and Hindus rising. In the United States, I was talking to someone, and I said, but you know, all the Hindu diaspora, they're all producing wealth, abundance, they're peaceful, they're helping everyone out. Why do they become a problem? And the person said, well, you know, they're doing so well, they may take our jobs. The Muslims are doing that. They're not going to take our jobs. They may cause trouble, end up in jail or with some other thing. So a certain jealousy is there, and also a civilizational conflict is going on. The Hindu civilization is the only real civilization that's maintained its continuity from the ancient world, with the Rishi culture, with the ancient art, which temples. What are the pyramids of Egypt? They're tourist items. Same thing with the monuments of Mexico, the Native American traditions of China.
The Greeks.
And the Greeks were closer. They say, oh, the Greeks were the first European. No, they weren't. What did they do? They had temple worship, they had astrology, they had ascetics. They even went to India like the Plotinus. So that civilizational challenge is there. So the materialistic civilizations and the monotheistic civilizations have seen the Hindu culture of civilization as a potential threat. It's also more metaphysically sophisticated, philosophically, higher states of consciousness, yoga. In fact, in the United States, the Christians formed groups to attack all the yoga groups and yoga gurus, and they put lots of money into those things. In some places, they succeeded because they didn't want that happening. So that civilizational challenge or conflict is happening, not because the Hindu tradition wants to take over other places, but these places have their boundaries. And I have to say that, unfortunately, even about the United States at the world's only superpower after 1991, it still wants to control the world. And Western civilization still wants to control the world. The textbooks are all giving Western civilization, and the non-Western civilizations have footnotes, or in the case of India, they're often just neglected altogether. So that renaissance at a civilizational level, there is a fear of that is going on and that needs to occur. And there's so many things. Take Puranas. Puranas are brand new. teachings, but yet they're turned into just a primitive mythology because it doesn't agree with the Puranas say the universe is which billions of years older than the modern science says. So Hindus have to recognize that. At the same time, we have a certain sense of universality, but you also have to understand your opponents. And what happens is these groups are targeting your children because they can target the children through the technology and the mass culture. And you see in India how the NGOs come in to magnify social differences, not to create harmony. Now, Modi has been very successful in raising the image of Hindu Dharma globally, but there is still a lot of opposition to do that, or it's done in the back road. Many people in the world appreciate the Hindu tradition, but it's hard for them to accept that it may be a greater tradition than what they have. And also the Hindu tradition has all the metaphysical dimensions that the mystics and other traditions touch, but they never go into in the same depth. And the Hindu Vedantic tradition can be compatible or can even guide science and medicine forward into a planetary age. That can be done by other traditions.
So we have seen, this is my impression is, when I started the jaipurdialogues about several years ago, and when I started the online version of it, it's about about 4 years. At that time, there were very few people talking about these issues. And even if there were, the response to them was minimal. Now there seems to be an explosion online. And of course, there are a lot of superficial ones. There are some very good ones too. And every day I see some new accounts come up who are they're teaching some Puranas or the tales from the Puranas. It's the kind of things that the old Gita press used to let out. They used to print these stories. They disappeared along the way. I didn't see them for almost 30, 40 years. Yes. Oh, they have all reappeared. Yes. So you see the tale of braveries, and you see them online of books also it is. You see a lot of Puranic tales coming up. Yes. Explanations from those Puranic tales. Somebody is writing a thread on his Matsya avatar, somebody writing a thread on some Mahabharata incident. Almost everything in Mahabharata is now available, yes. Not just online, but on social media. Yes. And somebody who really is discriminating, who wants to learn, he can. A lot of people that have now come online, good teachers, who write good threads, who debunk false histories, who counter people like
Particularly in the India context, Wikipedia doesn't accept that yet.
Oh yeah, Wikipedia doesn't accept that. And of course, I wrote much better on Wikipedia. Yeah. People, after being 10 years on Wikipedia suddenly irritated me.
Yes. But here's there's another interesting thing that's happening here. Now, the Indians, and particularly the Hindus, have the highest amount of high-tech people coming up in the world. They're not happening in America anymore. They're not happening much in Europe anymore. So that you have the most people into the high technology, but you're also preserving the higher traditions as well. So we become a good model for that. And you could see, as you were saying, how Puranas are there in the social media. Social media has benefit if it's not regulated by somebody else's.
Just let me add a few more examples. It's very interesting. You know Rabindranath Tagore, of course. She turned 93, I think day before yesterday. And somebody wished her her birthday. And I think she did. It might have got a few reposts. But if you see the flood of replies below that, yes, and 99% of them critical, some of them abusive. I don't favor abusers. 99% of them seem to know what evil kind of personality Ruvela Thapar is and what harm she has done. And that was all detailed of surprise. And we used to struggle. I think probably one of the first sessions against RA theory was organized by the Jaipur Dialogues, in which you appear. And today, if you write something in favor of the RM invasion theory, on the Twitter, for instance, is on X as it is online right now, about 1,000 people will come and demolish your argument. Ditto with Ambedkarites. The Ambedkarites have been in the forefront of misinformation as far as the Indian society is concerned. And you have to really see and how they are countered and how they are shredded to pieces, torn to shreds.
It's also interesting what's happening to the West, because
another example I'll give you. About an incident with I think it's from People's probably for a true share. Now she's probably blocked highest number of people or disturbed. Oh, or some of these people, if they say anything against India or against Hinduism, you will see a flood of replies. What happened in Maldives? Maldives, it was taken down by one single ex-user. So this sheer number of people, as you said, the number of high-tech people, the number of people who are on social media, India has that advantage of having a very, very large number of people on social media. There is actually, I saw these complaints among these circles, these Marxist circles or the leftist circles, is saying that these Indians are becoming a pest.
not only that, that's why they hate Elon Musk so much. See, Musk also opened that, changed that field in the West. And now they want to, in fact, if Trump had lost, then they would have banned Musk and taken Twitter down. But that's India's strength. See, you can adjust that and you can enter the communication there. So the question for that is maintaining the right level and the right subjects of communication, because otherwise people can flood it with whatever else they would do. For example, in America, they were controlling the social media during the election so that nothing positive could be said about Trump or even the people running with it. So control or proper use of social media is very important. And you are one of the luminaries, social media, in the social media universe in India, but also we need these programs elsewhere. There are some good programs in the West too, but at this level. And then also the good thing is you can then communicate this to the young people who are growing up with the media. Whereas in the past, their textbooks were just from the Thapar and you're from a deep, all the usual Marxist or whatever they.
I think in the older times, it wasn't possible to get the HCA logic text changed. But then so much pressure was brought upon them through the social media that they were forced to do it. And now, I didn't imagine really no longer chaos in these NCR textbooks.
Yes, but they should go further. They should have a list of the literature, Vedas, Puranas, etc., where, in there, and its subjects covered, and then even Devatas. What is a Devata? Devata is a cosmic principle. It's not simply a god or a goddess or whatever. And they should also teach
Powers of consciousness.
Yeah. Powers of consciousness. They should teach Dharma in the broader sense, and they should teach the great gurus of Bharat you should know about. Just as in the West, they go back to their scientists. Why is it that the gurus are left out, even though many of them may be famous in other countries?
Over the years, Islam has been very successful in imposing itself on the West through its advocacies, through imposition of Islamophobia principles and many other, the Gulf money from Saudi countries. They have been able to influence the academia.
Yes.
Where do you see this going?
Well, first of all, they always vote in mass and as a bloc. And if the Hindus don't vote, they're not going to be successful in any of these, in this political realm that we live in today. It's like they're not wanting to use money and not wanting to use a credit card. So the Hindu vote must come up. And with the Hindus vote in mass, now you'll notice that not this election, but the previous election, UK, with the Tories came back to power, the Hindu vote went up and more Hindus were in the cabinet and that sort of thing. You also see the influence form in the United States coming up as well with Trump's appointees. So first of all, the Hindus have to vote. Not voting is almost suicide today, agriculture now, for you, and voting in bloc, then also protesting, and not suddenly as I'm not saying you ride in the streets, but you send in protest, or you send in your disagreements, or you have boycotts of certain things. You have to use those tools as well. Now, do you remember the Mughals gained power because they had gunpowder, mainly, and were necessary. Otherwise, superior fighters. And if we look at the colonial world, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, the British who conquered the world, how did they conquer the world? Not because they were a superior civilization. They had better weapons. They had gunpowder, they had steel, they had all these new things. So it was brute force that gave them power. So the Muslims are adapting to a certain state of technology and media. And the Hindus have to be aware of that danger, like the demographic part of that as well. But those doors are open for the Hindus if they do that. And of course, now the Hindus have more wealth and more money. In fact, it's very funny. The British used to say the Hindus were too poor. Now they say the Hindus have too much money. And in America, they used to say, oh, the Hindus aren't educated. They're even superstitious people. Now they say Hindus are too well educated. They have all the high-level positions. So it requires a certain adaptation, but it needs to be done because you have to deal with the practical world also and understand how they operate. And what the Muslims realize is that people are still governed by fear. So if they protest and are violent, whereas the Hindus are quiet, and some of these British towns like Leeds, the British authorities would, in order to protect themselves from the Muslims attacking them, blame the Hindus when the Muslims riot. So you have to have that political realism as well. And also, at a certain level, even assert the superiority of what you have. Not just that you accept all religion is true, but you have certain higher teachings that the others may not have.
Correct. So I think there's enough reason to be optimistic.
Well, if you need a certain optimism, but you have to be a realist too. And being a realist also means that there are always these negative forces. One of the limitations of the new technology is that it gives a smaller group of people the ability to control. So the Hindus also have to be how to use the media and not come under others' control. And also I said compensate for it in the sense that it's very good to have the communication through the media, but you still need to do your puja, your meditation, your mantra, and have your connections to the universe. What did the rishis do? They accepted the cosmic word. They used to say the yogi in the cave then travel throughout the entire universe without leaving his cave. So we have to have that other vision to go with it as well.
Thank you very much, Bamdevji. It was an extremely enlightening session. I think all Hindus would be inspired by your views. Certainly, we are going to go a long way and we are going to reestablish ourselves. The Arjuna shares arise.
And I'm very happy to be with such an enlightened Hindu who can reflect my ideas and also help me understand them and better and broader.
Thank you already. Thank you all listeners, viewers. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, Vande.